Hello and welcome to Divorce Talk and More. I am Gabrielle Hartley, your host, and I am super duper excited because I have with me today Bill Eddy. He is a therapist, a mediator, and the chief innovator and officer of the High Conflict Institute. He wrote a very famous and important book that talks about BIFF, how to deal with high conflict couples. And he is the lead author of a book that is about to come out called Mediating High Conflict Disputes. And you can find him at highconflictinstitute.com. So welcome, Bill. I am super excited to have you with us here today.
Well, thank you, Gabrielle. I'm so glad to be on with you.
So can you tell us, first of all, to just back up and tell us a little bit about how you became interested in working with high conflict couples?
Well, I was a therapist, as you've mentioned, a licensed clinical social worker, and I liked, somehow I have this obsession with conflict, and I like conflict resolution. And I realized that some of the families I was working with, because I worked with children, teen, and parents, were involved in legal issues, divorce especially, and some other issues. And so I like conflict resolution. And I actually was volunteering in a neighborhood mediation center, like neighbor disputes, police, community, landlord, tenant, that stuff. And I said, I love this conflict resolution, and I want to be a mediator. And I looked around and there were no jobs for mediators. So I figured, oh, wait, lawyers are starting to get paid to mediate. So I'll become a lawyer so I can mediate. And that's exactly what I did. So I got a law degree in 1992, set up my own law and mediation office, and I would go to court in the mornings. For a couple of years, I figured I'll go to court and I'll do my mediations in the afternoons. Well, a funny thing happened. I started noticing, wait, my divorce cases, it's the exact same issues in the morning in court and in the afternoon in mediation. What's the big difference? And what I realized, it really was people's personalities. And I had learned as a clinical social worker doing therapy about personality disorders, and that people with personality disorders got stuck, that they often, they had no awareness of their part in problems. And they could be angry and vindictive and domineering and all these things. And I figured that's what I'm seeing in my high conflict cases at court, but nobody else realizes it. They think the issue is child support. No,
Right,
the issue is this.
The issue is the high conflict. It's funny because I offer flat rate mediation, and when I was formulating my packages, I was noticing a fair number of people do packages based on how many kids do you have or what kind of property do you have. But no, my packages are all around how well do you communicate with each other, you know.
Right.
How I don't say, do you believe that your spouse has an undiagnosed mental health disorder? But, but I thought about it because I think that drives a lot of the conflict. Do you agree?
Yes. In other words, we have this saying with High Conflict Institute, and that is with high conflict personalities, who may or may not have personality disorders, but may be on the edge, that the issue is not the issue, the personality is the issue. And what that means is you need to adapt your approach. And we teach that to everybody. And first of all, don't tell somebody you think they have a high conflict personality or personality disorder. I guarantee your life will be worse for at least a month, if not a year. But by realizing that, people need to adapt their approach. And this can be, co-parents, this can be lawyers, judges, mediators, therapists, other family members, is that to adapt their approach. And then they can often manage the relationship. But it's this being stuck that's the problem.
What would you say are the top ways to deal with a maladaptive person? Like if you're dealing with someone who's really argumentative, who does something like gaslighting all the time and turning things around, what kind of things can you do other than just exit the conversation? Are there other tips that you have?
Well, yeah, there's really 4 key things. And so I developed this method, I call it the CARS method: connecting, analyzing options, responding to misinformation, and setting limits on behavior. And so the first part, connecting, is rather than arguing with someone who's really being hostile with you, is connect with them, is connect with what they might be feeling under the surface, and just make a statement. We call it an ear statement that shows empathy, attention, or respect. So, wow, I can see how frustrated you are. Let's look at what some of our options are. And so, and I learned to do this with clients as a counselor, and then I learned it as a family lawyer, is to say, they're angry, say, Bill, this, you're not doing it right, or the case is going terrible. And I'll say, well, I can understand you're frustrated. Right now, we are right in the middle of some of the difficult things. And I can understand that. Now let's look at our options. So that's where you go, you connect just briefly, and then you analyze options. And anybody can do that. They can say, wow, because underneath anger and hostility is a vulnerable feeling. So it might be someone sad, they're afraid. One of the easiest for me is to know they're frustrated, because most people going through divorce have a lot of frustration. And if you're dealing with the court, you're dealing with a difficult partner, and the kids are upset, you're going to be frustrated. And when I say, wow, I see how frustrated you are, people feel like, oh, good, you get it, Bill.
Yeah, you heard me. You really hear me, right?
Yeah.
So
So that's the first two parts.
sorry.
Then the R is responding to misinformation. And that's where we develop the BIFF response method. It's just a
Oh,
simple statement that says what the accurate information is. So you don't have to tear down the other person and say you're an idiot and you're totally wrong. Just say, oh, you may not be aware. Here's what was happening. And you give your accurate information. And setting limits, you may need to say, and it goes with choices, is here's a couple of choices you have. If you do A, then I'll keep working with you. If you want to do B, you're going to have to do that with somebody else. So it's up to you. So you give people choices, but also tell them what the consequences are. And this isn't harsh. It's just, this is what I can do and I can't do that.
I often think about it like, I have 3 boys, and I always say, we could do this the hard way or the easy way. It's like a similar sort of way of framing things, right? Like, here's option A, which with an asterisk, I prefer that you proceed
Right,
along
and
this
you can
option,
say that, yeah.
right? But if you want option B, you can, and here are the consequences. And, I think when you're dealing with a difficult spouse, or soon to be ex-spouse, you have to be careful in your tone and your delivery. And that's something I like so much about BIFF. I know I really want to get to mediating high conflict disputes, but if you can just really quickly tell the audience about BIFF, because BIFF is like just the best.
Well, BIFF stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And we started it as a way to respond to hostile emails between couples in divorce and separation. And so it's a way, you get a hostile message, says you're terrible, terrible parent, you're doing everything wrong. And you feel like responding, saying, no, you're a terrible parent, but instead, there's usually an issue in there somewhere. And so you respond to that. Maybe they say, I want some of your parenting time because I've got a special event. And so, maybe I've asked for that. And the other person says, no, that's ridiculous. I'm not giving you any of my time. And you're an idiot to think I would. And so my response can be, well, let me tell you a little more about the event. This will be how it works. This will be when it happens. This will be where it is. With this information, I hope you'll reconsider. So you don't hook into any of that hostility, but you get your information out. And often with a BIFF response, you just end it, or you can say, with this information, I hope you'll reconsider. Please let me know yes or no by Thursday at 5. That way you can really nail it down. But by keeping it brief, straight information, a little bit friendly, thanks for responding, or thanks for letting me know your perspective. And then firm doesn't mean harsh, it means you end the hostile conversation.
I just love that. I always, when I was litigating, I would often end my emails to the other lawyer who might be have the difficult personality. Like, I remain an optimist. That's my friendly, right? Always
Yeah.
the optimist. Yours, Gabrielle. So you're.
Let me just hold this up so
Oh yeah.
that
Oh, I
people know
love
this is
it. It
this
is.
is the new one, just came out recently, and it's BIFF for co-parent communication, with 28 sample conversations with responses that aren't good, and then a response that's a BIFF response.
That
So
is so helpful. And if you are dealing with someone difficult, I am going to tell you, and I'm not paid any residuals or anything like that. Get the BIFF books. They are just, Bill breaks it down in such a digestible way that is actionable, like from the second you read it. You don't have to like study, you just open the book. Oh, this is a problem that I could relate to. This is exactly, and you're gonna feel like, oh my God, yeah, like I'm not alone, because Bill's dealt with, like, he has a whole institute about people like me. So mediating high conflict disputes, is that a book for the end user or for the mediator or for both, or what?
well, it's primarily for professional mediators. So it's geared to people who do mediation in their work in any setting. So it could be divorce mediation, it could be workplace mediation, could be community mediation, any type of setting. And so we've done training of mediators in all these different settings, even government agencies, et cetera, around the world. And so what's interesting is high conflict disputes tend to include one or more high conflict personalities. And so this includes all those adaptations I was talking about earlier in the context of conflict resolution. But it can be useful for anybody. And that's what we say right at the beginning. It's aimed at professional mediators, but anybody who finds themselves in the middle of a high conflict dispute can use these tips. And we've got over 100 tips, as well as a very structured method that we call New Ways for Mediation, which really means new skills, because the skills the mediator emphasizes are slightly different. And it's teaching the parties skills that will help them resolve their dispute. And what we've learned is the parties need to be practicing more engagement in actually 4 key skills, which I can get to.
Yeah. Well, so yeah. Let me just ask you this, and I do want you to get to that. So let's say I'm the mediator, right? And I got my first training, Bill. I don't know if you know this. It was like trial by fire. I was about 30 years old, and I got this job for Judge Jeffrey Sunshine in New York City. And for a
I
while,
love him, by the way.
I love him too. Yeah,
I've
he's awesome.
spoken with him.
Yeah, he speaks very highly of you as well. For a period of time, he was the only judge and I was the only court attorney in the entire borough of Staten Island, hearing every single divorce. So it was like really trial by fire with very, very high conflict trial ready cases. And what I sort of learned is, like, as soon as you really validated somebody and they cried, then the whole case would come together, because it's never about the issue, it's always about the emotion, right? So in my private practice, I try not to make people cry, but but it does, when you move the emotions, you can move the case. So I'm wondering what tips you might have for a mediator who is dealing with high conflict people, when they have one person who maybe feels like they were, lied to throughout the course of the marriage, or never heard or never understood, and the other person is just either, constantly betraying them and then gaslighting them, or very argumentative, the whole suite of behaviors.
Yeah. So here's the dilemma: is 80% of people can talk about how they feel, and in the process feel better. And the same 80% of people can have some insight into their own part in the conflict. Often when you've address some of the emotional issues and that pressure is relieved, they're more able to have insight. And they're also able to talk about the past. But about 10%, maybe up to 20, right somewhere in the middle. But I like to say 10% of people have high conflict personalities. And a huge difference for them is that you can't really open up emotions and they're unable to manage them. They're flooded with emotions because they're carrying all these emotions from their whole life. And I'll briefly try to explain that. For some reason, they don't go through the normal grieving and healing process. And that's the 5 stages people know: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. High conflict people get stuck on anger. And so if they start to feel sad, it quickly shifts to anger, and it's not even conscious. And bargaining is just out of the question. They're absolute, all or nothing in their thinking. And so what happens is they don't grieve and heal, but they get distracted. And when they're distracted, they feel better. And so when they're thinking about things, when they're doing things, they feel better. But if you focus their attention on how they feel helpless, vulnerable, weak, like a victim in life. And that's part of the dynamic of really all personality disorders, but also high conflict people who have traits of personality disorders. And so what happens is we don't want to go to emotions in high conflict mediation. We want to keep them focused on problem solving and keep them busy thinking of proposals, thinking of solutions, rather than thinking of the past where all their upset emotions are. So there's 3 big adaptations. One is we try not to open up emotions, although we acknowledge them. Like say, I see how frustrated, how sad, how angry, whatever it is. And we'll say, we're not going to talk much about the past here. We're going to focus on what to do going forward. And we don't try for insight. Instead, we look at choices in the present. So this is a huge shift. And I train mediators all the time. And this is such a huge shift. And that's why we have them do practice mediations, because they go, oh my God, Bill, I said, so how do you feel about that? Then it blew up. And I said, yeah. So what you want to do is say, what do you think of that proposal? So it's very proposal focused, and it's their proposals. So they get to talk, but they need to think. And we analyze their proposals and look at, well, here's, Jane's proposal, here's Joe's proposal. Well, how can we fit these together? Rather than, well, how do you feel about what she said about what you did last year? Which for high conflict people, they can't process without it exploding.
Let me ask you a question. How do you balance dealing with a high conflict person and just talking about the proposals with the idea that we really want to talk about the whys versus the whats, right? So let me back up for a second. For anyone who's listening, who's not a trained mediator, when we come into a negotiation, we tend to be very positional. We want certain things. Those are the whats. But there are reasons behind why we want them. We want the house. I have to have the house. Why do you want the house? I need security. I need stability. My mother lives around the corner, whatever the reason is, right? So usually in a mediation training, even in advanced mediation training, we're always working on getting behind to the why, right? But with a high conflict person, what I think I'm hearing you say is maybe we don't want to dwell so much on the why. We want to keep moving it along. Is that right? Or am I missing something?
Absolutely. And in fact, so the why is technically called interests.
Yes.
What are the interests? And that's how we've all been trained for 40 years. And I was trained 30 years ago in interest-based, the Getting to Yes book. I still have it.
Oh, I love that. I got the only A in the Getting to Yes course in 15 years in my law school. I still remember because,
Yeah, fantastic.
I love that book. If you don't have that book, get that book. And there's a bunch of them too. Getting to Yes. Okay, go ahead.
And what I say is that's brilliant for 80%. of mediations, 80% of people. But the 10% of people who are high conflict, what we've discovered is, and over the last 10 years, Michael Lomax and I have both been using this method, he in British Columbia and me in California, and having the same results, and really increasing our settlement rate significantly by, instead of trying to look under the surface at interests, is we meet the parties where they are. And as you said, positions basically, become unnecessarily blocking of resolution because you don't know what's underneath, what the why is. What we've learned is that high conflict people can't successfully go to the why, that you can't look at their interests. Why is that important to you? And in fact, why often turns into because he's an SOB and because she's a liar. And so instead, we pretty quickly, after some introductory parts and setting the agenda, which they do with our assistants, which is another paradigm shift, then we go to proposals. People go, wait a minute, you didn't look at interests and why, and say that's right. So we start with their proposals because that's where they are. So you said the thing about the house. So I remember a case I have, it's a great example. They come in, couple sits down, and the wife starts pounding the table and she says, I'm getting the effing house. I'm getting the effing house. And I said, oh, that's a proposal. We'll be getting to that soon. And she said, no, Bill, it's what has to happen. And I said, well, in mediation, we have to discuss things and then you make decisions. And it could be that's the decision, or it could be something even better, or it could be an adaptation of that. So we treat that as a proposal, and in a few minutes, we'll get to your proposal. So we get to her proposal. And the way it works is you don't just reply before, you have to ask questions. And see, this is a shift, and high conflict people can do this, but you have to guide them. Ask questions about her proposal. And like, when would that start? When would I need to move out? How much would you pay me? Blah, 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 blah.
Pragmatics, you get very practical, right? Like how
Yes.
it's going to work versus feeling, which is going to flood into this whole big meshagas that we don't need.
Right. And so by keeping them focused on the who, what, where, and when, I think we're keeping them focused more kind of in left brain problem solving,
right,
rather than right brain emotional,
right.
Big
We're like going like this to the emotions. We're like, if this is your emotions, you're engaging your thinking brain.
Right.
Right.
And when you direct anybody, but especially high conflict people, to thinking and doing, they'll go there with you. And so by directing them to stay focused on deconstructing proposals and then making new proposals back and forth, they're able to reach agreements without ever discussing interests. Or if they're stuck, then the mediator says, here's what I hear is important to you. Here's what I hear is important to you. Am I right? And they'll say, yeah, or adapt it a little bit. What have you just told them as the mediator? You've told them what their interests are. So I call it reverse interest-based negotiation.
Love it. I absolutely love it. And I could talk to you forever and ever. I am like so excited and inspired by all of this work. But unfortunately, we are going to have to wrap up. But if you can please tell people who are listening where they can learn more about your work and how they can order your book, that would be fantastic.
Great. So highconflictinstitute.com, www.highconflictinstitute.com. We have lots of training information, video training on demand. We have books, we have articles, we have consultation, all of that. We also have, for individuals, we have conflictplaybook.com, which is especially good for parents. We have an online parenting program with that, a class, 12 sessions that any parent can sign up for. I think it's $67 for 12 sessions, like $12.
That's fantastic.
It's incredibly inexpensive. Yeah. In terms of books, you can get the book anywhere, Amazon, or you can come to our website, Barnes and Noble. All these stores carry that book and our other books. Yeah, so it's easy to find our stuff. If nothing else works, Google Bill Eddy,
Yeah.
and you'll
And
find
I'll
me
have
and
it
my
right in the show
books.
notes. And it's called Mediating High Conflict Divorce. So thank you so much for being here with us today. And if you enjoyed listening once again to Divorce Talk and More, please like this video and subscribe, and we will be talking to you soon. And if you'd like to read the article by Bill Eddy, head over to the Better Part blog, and you can learn more about Bill's work.
Thanks so much, Gabrielle.
Thank you.